After 4 p.m., so I think that we might start. Again, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the European Network Remembrance and Solidarity, I would like to welcome you all during today's webinar, which is entitled how to talk about history of Roma and Sinti in the classroom. My name is Urszula Bijoś. I'm a project coordinator for the High Story Lessons online platform. I'm a historian, educator. I'm also a teacher trainer, and today I'll be the host of our meeting. You can try to write something on the chat and check whether this is working. There are 43 of us at the webinar for now, and today with me is also Małgorzata Kołaczek. She's a doctor of political science, assistant professor at the Jagiellonian University in Kraków, Poland, and she's a vice president and co-founder of the Foundation Towards Dialogue. And this is only part of her bio. And Małgorzata, could you say hi?
Hello, everyone. I am here and listening. I hope everybody can see me. Can you see me? Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here and very excited about the tool that will be presented by Urszula. Also, our discussion following the presentation.
Yes. Thank you, Małgorzata. And there is Helena Link with us, who is one of the co-authors of the teaching resources we created within this project, and she will be our support during the webinar. So just few information before we start. Your cameras and microphones are turned off, but I invite you to listen actively, to think about your questions, to comment on chat. I will just check in a minute whether it's working, because if not, I will just turn it on. And this webinar will be recorded, but without chat, so your data or image won't be visible anywhere. And our meeting will last 1 hour and 30 minutes, so we will be finishing at 5:30 p.m. Brussels time. And I would like to inform you that after the webinar, I'm gonna send you an email with links to all the presentations and all the teaching resources we will mention during today's event. This webinar is funded by the EU, so it's open up to everyone, no matter your nationality or gender. Okay, so we've got 3 goals for today's meeting. First of all, I'll speak more from the methodological point of view. So I'll provide you with ideas and guidelines on how to address history of Roma and Sinti in the classroom. We've got the classroom in the title of our event. However, I've seen a lot of educators, memory places employee between the participants. So we've got people who represent formal and non-formal education here. So ideas and teaching resources we're gonna speak about, they can be used in the formal and in non-formal education. We will speak also about the challenges you may encounter when addressing Roma and Sinti history. And then Małgorzata, she will speak more from the perspective of an institution which is a leading organization that acts on behalf of the Roma community in Poland. So she will, from heart of her experience, she will advise us on how to overcome the stereotypes. I've got an hour and a half, so we know that it would be very short, but it would be just maybe, for some of you, it might be a starting point. For some of you, it might be a follow-up, but we really, she'll speak more from the how it is to run an organization which aims to create a society where Roma community is treated equally to others. So those are our goals for today's meeting. And just before we start and we'll get into the point of our today's meeting, I'll speak very briefly about the High Story Lessons. I told you already that I'm the project coordinator for that platform. And this is the place where you can find ready-to-use and innovative teaching resources which aiming to foster critical thinking among the students. History lessons grew up in the European network Remembrance and Solidarity. As we've got in our name, we are network of 5 countries, those which are marked on yellow on the map, which are Germany, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, and Romania. Though those blue countries, those are observer countries, but in any other, mostly in any other places in Europe, we've got also partner institutions. And our main goal of our institution is to foster a dialogue about the 20th century European history, the very difficult and challenging part of the European history. So it's not only history lessons, we've got other projects. For example, In Between, that's the project we just ended very briefly a couple of days ago, actually. It's a project where students from different European countries, they meet in the borderlands regions where they are interviewing witnesses of history, and they're just thinking about how it is to live in the borderland region. And another project which might be really interesting for you as a teachers is the Sound in the Silence, which is a project which will take place very soon in October in the former prison in the Pitești Memorial near Bucharest in Romania. I know that we've got a lot of Romanian teachers here too, and this project is about students and meeting in one of the memory places, and they just meet. They've got several workshops with the artists, and then their task is to prepare a final performance during which they are able to speak about their difficult emotions. So yeah, that's the project which is already going on, but we will have also registration for that for the next year. So just stay tuned about the Sound in the Silence too. We've got a lot of conferences and workshops. We're publishing a lot. So I just encourage you to visit our website and see what's going on. Just a few words more about history lessons. As you may see on the map, it's about Central and Eastern Europe, but not only. And the aim of the teaching resources we are publishing there at the history lessons is to create resources which are present history in the multi-perspective way. So they're just trying to, get all those different histories from the European countries together. We've got different formats as infographics, animation, lesson scenarios, lesson plans. In times of everything's getting digital, we are digital too. We are trying, to go with the times, but we are very much engaged into source-based source-based teaching resources. That's why you will just see how in the following minutes I will speak about our resources that we are very much committed to showing the historical resources themselves. And we've got a series of webinars, as we've got today during today's meeting. On our website, you can find also recordings from the webinars from the past. So if you're interested in, and of course, you can subscribe to our newsletter and know and just know what's going on in the program. And here below you can see languages in which teaching resources are available, which is English, German, Hungarian, Polish, Romanian, and Slovak. Yeah, so that's about the history lessons. And we're really trying to work with teachers closely themselves, so trying to test all the teaching resources we are publishing, and to include those materials which are valuable for teachers, and also to address important topics, not only those who are included in the curriculum, but also those which are omitted, as the Holodomor, so the Great Famine in Ukraine in 1932-1933, or the Roma and Sinti genocide, which is rarely covered by the history books. And speaking of that, here on the slide you can see the picture of a wooden monument. It's a wooden sculpture designed by the Roma artist from Poland, Małgorzata Kołaczek, and this memorial, which is located in the forest in Poland, it recalls the history of the forgotten genocide, so the genocide of Roma and Sinti. And we know that as you, the teachers, you are somehow trying to answer to the students for the question, why should we remember today? Why we are even learning about that? And we just came up here on the slide with information on why the genocide of Sinti and Roma is very important, and why should we remember it today. So first of all, Roma and Sinti has been discriminated in many European countries, not only during the war, but many years before. Secondly, genocide never just happens. There's always a set of circumstances which occur or which are created to build the climate in which genocide can take place. And according to the model of the 10 stages of the genocide, there are several steps which are leading to the genocide and which existing before the genocide. That's why we want to show examples of discrimination and persecution for students to be more aware of those steps which are before the genocide. Thirdly, Roma and Sinti are rarely mentioned as the victims of the Holocaust or Polaimos or the genocide which happened during the Second World War. So here on the slide you can see some numbers. They differ very much due to lack of the historical resources, but historian estimate that maybe that might be as high as even 500,000. And the last reason, there might be found, of course, 100 more, but the last I will speak about is that the Roma community still suffers from various types of discrimination. And that's what Małgorzata will speak a little bit more about. But that's why this topic is so persistent, and it's not only rooted in history, but it very much influences today's life. What I would like to show you is that is the mind map we have created within in our institution, which is called Marginalised Histories. Discrimination and persecution of Roma and Sinti. Here you can see the QR code, so you can scan it, or as I just told you, we will send you that on the email, and I would like to show you maybe the map itself, because I think it might be just better than the presentation. Okay, so that's the map, which can be accessed through the browser, or it can be opened in the mobile version. And the core of the map it's created. We've got like 5 countries on the map, which are Germany, Croatia, Hungary, Poland, and Romania. Those are countries. From those countries, we're just working with the researchers from those countries, but we of course think about the next steps, and it would be great to have more countries joining the project. And by clicking on the map, you can see the 4 or 5 case studies of examples of discrimination and persecution from the given country. So, for example, by clicking on building a negative image in media, you can read about this case study. So how before the Second World War, Roma were depicted in the press, And you can also compare this case study with case studies from other countries. So students, they might see that it's not only a case of a given country, but things like building a negative image of in the media of Roma, it existed also in different countries. So you've got a very short text which can be shown to the students. We're trying to make it as simple as possible without making it, you know, too simple. So here, by clicking on the given example, for example, you can read about the women in the Roma movement and their fight against discrimination, and also read about the same case study in different countries. That's the case study of a young women from Romania who were fighting for establishing kindergartens for Roma kids in Romania. And after reading the 4 case or 5 case studies, you can also read about the genocide itself. We are more focused on the pre-war period. However, it cannot be omitted that what happened after the persecution and the discrimination in the interwar period, it was the genocide, and it differed very much in the different countries. And here, entering the About section, you can also read about the goals students will achieve when working with the map, and what kind of case studies we prepared. So they tackle things like lack of access to education, relegation by the military, removal from the public spaces, building a negative image in the press, as I showed you. And as I said already, we were aiming to show as much historical sources as possible. It wasn't very easy because it was already 100 years ago, and there are a lot of press articles, but there are also legal acts, graphics, photos, and maps. So students, they can really get into this topic by comparing the historical source together. If you want, there's also full text of the case studies available in the PDF file. So if you want to print it somehow, it's just, you know, it just opens up a new window and you can just read the full text separately of the case studies which are added here to the map. And just briefly showing you that we are working with really great researchers from 5 countries. One of them is Helena, who's with us today. And yeah, and we're just very much invite you to use this resource and to work with that. And this map has been designed for students which are 14 till 15 years old. And starting from 13th actually until the end of the high school. And what I would like also show you that together with a teacher from Poland, from Wrocław, Łukasz Migniewicz, he worked on 5 ideas for activities you can do with this given map. So 5 ideas for activities with your students you are advised to use when just using the map. So that's why I will come back to my presentation, and you'll be able to see them. Okay. I just need to come back here. Okay, so students who for whom Łukasz designed those activities they were from 13 to 15 years old, and he had possibility to test them in September 2024. So just last week actually, because as you know, the school year just started. And they were tested in Wrocław, Poland, and the idea for them, it was to use them during the history or civic education lesson. In Poland, there's a lesson which is called Wiedza o społeczeństwie, so like knowledge about the society. And and it was just that's where he tested those teaching resources. And on the mind map, you will find short descriptions of the teaching resources. And on the email I'm gonna send you after the meeting, you will find the full descriptions of them. And here I will just briefly speak about 4 of them, and after that I'll give the floor to Małgorzata. Okay, so the first idea is the comparison of Roma representation in media, art, and culture now and 100 years ago. The teacher in this exercise asks students for paying attention to the language, to the tone of the articles, the context in which Roma are placed, and the general way in which they are portrayed. So there are a lot of questions a teacher can ask here. So how the language what was the language used to describe the Roma, how it changed, what has been the impact of different ideologies of the 20th century, for example, National Socialism in the interwar period, or other ideas of the 20th century. So, for example, what the impact of today's human rights movement of nowadays press, or how the contemporary human rights movement changed the way we write about minorities in Europe. So what Łukasz also told, that for his students the language was very difficult, so it was difficult for them to interpret the older texts. It was kind of easy to understand, to find and to understand nowadays text, but for him it was a good idea to introduce a brief discussion on the historical context and the vocabulary. And he said also that many students had to read the passages several times before they fully understood them. So I think that also it requires some time to leave for students to really dig in deeper into the comparison. Okay, second idea for to use this map, Marginalized History, in your classroom is a mind map in which students were divided into groups, and they got a large sheet of paper, or they just did it online, digital, and part of them wrote the stereotypes and the other part wrote reality. Need to work on the reality, let's say reality, which is hard to tell which is reality, but the one was assumed to write all the stereotypes they associated with Roma and Sinti people, and the other were supposed to write like true statements. So and Łukasz also that many students had difficulty distinguishing their own prejudice from objective facts that they learned from source text. I was surprised that despite their general awareness on Roma people, students often repeated stereotypes that they heard. So it might be also a discussion after creating such a mind map. It might be a good idea to work also with the stereotypes. Another exercise we advise to use is the letter from the past. So the idea here was to ask students to write a letter from the perspective of a person living 100 years ago. So there are several questions which can be brought here. For example, what events have affected my situation and family? What dreams and fear do I have for the future? What is my daily life like? What relationships do I have with people outside my community? So in the practice, the writing the letter was met with the great enthusiasm, but it had also its own difficulties and challenges. So several students had really troubles into getting into writing a letter. Even the form of writing the letter, it was a challenging because it's a task for students age 13. And they found really hard to imagine how life looked like. They lack a little bit of historical knowledge, but they were advised by the teacher, and also expressing emotions in the problem. It was challenging because they often asked how to balance between like their imaginary and the real life from people who lived 100 years ago. But I speak about the challenges because those difficulties eventually led to a better understanding of the subject, because once they had overcome the initial barriers, it really evoked their emotions. And here the task is to encourage students to reflect on the importance of viewing history through the eyes of individual person, not only through political events as they used to do it very often on the history lessons. And the last proposal is the simulation. So it's kind of a discussion which may really last 2.5 hours if you have time for that. And it's about International Court of Human Rights. So here, this activity challenges students to understand very complex issues of human rights, historical crimes, and the process of restoring justice, because as you may know, it took really a long time to address Roma and Sinti genocide in the law. And here what might follow this simulation is a discussion on historical crimes and social responsibility for them. So in the frames of this kind of simulation, you can divide your class into groups. So we can have a human rights advocates, we can have historians, descendants of Sinti and Roma, the lawyers who are representing a given country. And here the task for student is to build their argumentation skills, and create more of the empathy for the Roma and Sinti history. So here, in this case, this task posed the most argumentation challenges. So all those students, they were eager to take on roles. They had difficulty developing the arguments which are not based on emotions, but on the historical facts. But the dynamics in this case, it was very lively, and students, they very much get into the argumentation. And at the end, what was very important, it was the discussion at the very end on justice and historical responsibility. It was intense, and it showed that the students were only beginning to understand how complex these issues are. So those are 4 ideas for the activities, and as I told you, they're just described in a way they're ready to use for you in the classroom or in your educational practice. And there was also a 5th of them, if there are any people from Hungary. So we've got the Esztergom city case written in the case studies. You can get into the map to discover that. And that's the map. So we're looking forward also for your feedback on that, and we will be very interested in listening whether you had the possibility to use it with your students, with your target groups. And just last thing is that this August, like each August, on 23 August, which is the day of signing Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact, the European Day of Remembrance of the victims of totalitarian regimes is commemorated. And due to that day, we are trying each year to produce a short video, a short clip, which speaks about one of the victims of the totalitarian regimes. And this year we produced 2 of them. The first one speaks about Emily Machalkova, who was a Roma woman from Czechia, like today's Czech Republic, and she lived until a very old age. She was a survivor, and she founded the first art museum related to the Roma art in Brno in Czech Republic. So that's the first clip, and the second one tells a story about Johan Trollman, who was a boxer who unfortunately died in 1944, and he was a victim of Nazism, and he suffered very much as a person of a Roma, as a Sinti. He was a German Sinti, German boxer. So we very much encourage you to learn more about this history. Yeah. And and actually that's from my side, that's it. I would just try to fix the chat maybe. If you want to if you want to somehow comment, you can do it on chat, but I'll give the floor to Małgorzata, and she will speak more about her perspective.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Ursula, for this presentation, because it's a great leeway to generally discuss what we are doing as well as a foundation, because many of those tools or levels of representation of Roma and Sinti Holocaust and knowledge about it are already presented in the tool itself. So it's I think it's a very comprehensive one and very successful in our practice to use some of the techniques that are used in the ENRS tool. So I'm very happy to be able to talk a little bit more about what we are doing and how it's connected with the Remembrance, and talking a little bit more about history of Roma and Sinti in Europe, because still the topic, although much more present in the public sphere, not only in Poland but generally in Europe, in comparison, for example, to 20 years ago when I was starting my both research and activist journey. But at the same time, there is still a lot to be done, and there are a lot of successes, but still a lot of blank pages, blank spots, and things that such initiatives that we're talking about today are absolutely necessary and very, very important to promote as widely as possible. And so when we are talking about achievements, I would say one of the achievements is that we are talking about Roma and Sinti Holocaust. We are talking about Roma and Sinti genocide, because it wasn't a given, as I mentioned, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. Now we can say that Roma and Sinti Holocaust is actually the only topic that is neutrally presented in the media about Roma and Sinti nowadays. So this is an achievement, because it was 10, 15 years ago called forgotten Holocaust, forgotten genocide. That was how historians, activists, people, researchers involved with education about Roma and Sinti communities spoke about this period of the Second World War and the plight of European Roma and Sinti. Now there is more awareness, more very reliable tools, and more activists of Roma and non-Roma and pro-Roma organizations that are working towards the same goal, which is not only to disseminate the knowledge about what happened during the Second World War, but also to show mechanisms, what led to the treatment of Roma and Sinti during the Second World War before, and what is happening right now contemporary in Europe when talking about anti-Gypsyism. And anti-Gypsyism, I was just sharing a personal story. Today, we are very active in supporting Ukrainian Roma refugees as a foundation. And I was at the study visit. 3 organizations from Ukraine are visiting 3 organizations from Poland, supporting Ukrainian refugees generally. I was making a presentation about our foundation and used the word anti-Gypsyism. Somebody asked, is it okay to use anti-Gypsyism? Isn't that racist to use gypsy in the word? But at the same time, we don't have a good term for a phenomenon that is actually ancient old, but was named in 2012, which is anti-Gypsyism, because the alternative term is Romaphobia, which is also not very much accepted because it already indicates phobia, some type of fear. Anti-Gypsyism is using gypsyism or gypsy, which can be considered a slur in certain contexts or very pejorative words in others. And there is a attempt to try to coin another term, which is anti-Roma sentiment, which is also naturally that much popular. So we are still in 2024, we are still in the framework of looking for terms of naming the processes that actually Roma and Sinti were facing in Europe since the time that they came to Europe in the 14th and 15th century. So the phenomenon, as I mentioned, is very well known, but still the need to name it or the maybe attention on that topics was started to be visible only in 21st century. So that already gives you a certain indication how those aspects of talking about Roma and Sinti persecution generally, also during the Second World War, but not only, were treated in education, in science, in academia, on the public forum. As I can see, there is a comment that in Ireland, anti-Roma discrimination is the word, but at the same time, anti-Gypsyism is the word being used, for example, by IRA, which is International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, and now the term or definition of that term is being coined. And also, for the first time, the European Parliament used anti-Gypsyism in 2015 when talking generally of what is happening with the European Roma population and why all those strategies supporting Roma are not really working because of anti-Gypsyism, anti-prejudice towards Roma. I always quote Timaya Junghaus, who is executive director of ERIAC, which is European Roma Institute of Arts and Culture, the first institution of this magnitude in Europe, not only documenting the culture of Roma, but also being a promoter of Romani artists, also talking about persecution, some of them, and I will talk about them a little bit later. And she said that nowadays many Roma have 2 or 3 PhDs, but they cannot find work, right? So this is showing the paradox of really creating a certain narrative about European Roma. And fortunately, nowadays, in recent years, we can observe more neutral narrative regarding Roma and Sinti Holocaust, but it wasn't always a case, actually. For many years, Roma who suffered during the Second World War were kind of, maybe not blamed, that would be too strong of a word, but they were deemed responsible for their own memory. Like the memory about Roma and Sinti Holocaust wasn't a part of European memory or European remembrance or European history. That should be only really taken into consideration and really tried to be emphasized by the Romani organization, Romani academics, Romani activists. And of course, Romani activists, Romani organizations were the first ones that started to speak about it openly. In Germany, the first attention towards what happened during the Second World War was actually in 1980s, where there were hunger strikes led by Romani Rose, one of the most I would say, famous Romani leaders nowadays from the Sinti group, who most of his family actually died during the Second World War. And he had to take the former survivors to Dachau camp and hunger strike in order to have media attention, because Roma were denied reparations because before 1943, where the Zigeunerlager in Auschwitz-Birkenau was formed because of the racial reasons. So we are talking about 1980s, and many of those breakthroughs, positive breakthroughs in regards to remembrance of the Roma and Sinti Holocaust actually happened in 21st century. So we can already see how much of the history we won't be able to know anymore, because many of people are no longer with us, unfortunately, or many of those proofs and many of those indications are no longer to be found. And even when Ursula was saying about the photo that started her presentation, the monument in Bożęcin, this is a great example when talking with students why to talk about Roma and Sinti Holocaust. This monument was created in 2011 in Bożęcin forest, where 29 Roma were killed and 21 of them were children. And it was destroyed in 2016, vandalized. But Małgorzata Mirgatas, who is a Romani artist, but also she was last year represented Poland in Polish Roma Pavilion in Venice Biennale. So we can see those positives, progresses, I would say. She actually used those destroyed parts of her monument to rebuild a new one. So that also shows the input and the contribution of the members of the Romani community in their own memory. And without them, this memory wouldn't be present. But it doesn't mean that there are still so many places all over Europe that we need to commemorate, that we need to talk about. And Roma, being a minority, the biggest one in Europe, but still a minority without their own country, their own resources, need those pro-Roma organization, cultural institutions, and state awareness and awareness of us as members of the European communities to really strive for better remembrance of European Roma and Sinti Holocaust, genocide, poraimos, samudaripen, because we can find so many different words to that, and so probably it's a topic for a different meeting, but very much interesting as well. We as a foundation, education, we were founded in 2012, 12 years ago. I was one of the co-founders. The second one was Joanna Telewicz. So we were Roma, non-Roma team of academics, but also very much involved in the commemoration of Roma and Sinti Holocaust in Auschwitz, in the former Auschwitz-Birkenau, in Zigeunerlager. For many years, we worked with organizations really organizing those commemorations, as well as researching many topics regarding Roma and Sinti Holocaust, including testimonies, especially Joanna, as well as intergenerational trauma, for example. And generally, the topic of education about Roma and Sinti Holocaust was always very important for us. And we tried to, as a foundation, provide reliable tools in order to really disseminate the knowledge about it. I don't know if you can view my presentation well, or it's not really, yeah. Is it visible?
It is,
Okay.
it is.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. And of course, now for the last almost 3 years, we're very much active in supporting Ukrainian Roma refugees. We run Roma Community Center in Warsaw, but at the same time, when providing education about what is happening in Ukraine, we need to also, when we are educating professionals, we are educating members of the local authorities, teachers, educators, health professionals, policemen, policewomen, many different people who are in their everyday work going into contact with Romani communities. Holocaust is being, as I mentioned, neutral, but everything before is blank page. Nobody talks about it. Nobody knows nothing about it really, because we are not being taught about it in schools, and Roma don't have many spaces to really also learn about themselves, because it's not part of the mainstream education. And what is visible in regards to what is happening after the war, so in contemporary times as well, it's very much stereotypical. So there's not a lot of place in the mainstream to really show alternative images of the Roma community members. It's either musical festivals, which is a positive stereotype, but still a stereotype, showing communities that are very much marginalized, impoverished, and creating an image that those communities want to live this way, naturally talking about the context and what happened and why they are living in those this type of settlements for generations, not showing that they were actually moved in many countries and settled forcibly in those very impoverished region, for example, experienced white flight in education and labor market. This is not being discussed. Roma are being just shown as a very poor community choosing to live in a limbo kind, so to speak, being just taking a day by day and not really thinking about the future, not having any memory, not having any goals, dreams, nothing, just really choosing to be living on the margins. And of course, all the stereotypes that we are hearing and we are growing up with through culture, through literature, paintings, music, but now pop cultures were many different series, many different comic books as well. Roma are being portrayed in a very specific, certain way. Or even if they are portrayed in a positive way, they are not, for example, when there's like Marvel Studios presenting, for example, Scarlet Witch, who is of Gypsy origin, is not really being portrayed of Roma origin, is not really being portrayed as a Roma, or Magneto, her father, right? So there are many different outlets. So even if there's a positive, it's not being presented to the mainstream at all. It's not being part of the discourse. And we are trying as a foundation to provide alternative images of Roma and not talking about Roma, but working with Roma. 1/3 of our team is of Roma origin from Polish and Ukraine. So we are generally, first of all, listening to the voices of many different Roma people, because Roma communities, cultures are very diverse. It is not one group, and this is the main mistake, or maybe ignorance, or maybe neglect, or maybe in some cases it can be intentional, to create an image of a mass of without faces, with the same characteristics, but not really focusing on individual. And the first thing when talking about and working especially with young people, when talking about Roma communities, it's to make them individual. So using those personal stories, like in the presented tool, but I will also show you, I'm just checking the time because we don't have that much of it, some other tools that are showing Roma, their voices, their opinions, and them taking responsibility and ownership of their image whenever they have the platform to do that. So this is one of the things that we are always striving for. Since we don't have that much time in regards to talking about the organization, if somebody is interested, just visit our site. We have that in Polish and in English, and we have some resources there. But for sure, we are very much community-based organizations, and all of our educational activities, which includes workshops, providing tools, creating social campaigns, and doing research, is very much important for us to really reach different groups with content that can be useful for the work. But also we are very much what is very important for us is to show marginalization of Roma, for example, in a more systemic context, and show the consequences of certain policies in different European countries that were done historically and are done at present times. And this is also what the tool that was presented by Ursula and some of the tools I will be presenting later on are very much on point with. So they are not only showing what happened during the Second World War, but also showing what happened before, and trying to really combat this image that Roma were always living outside of European societies, that they were always outsiders, didn't want to have any contact with the European communities, which is in many of the instances is not the case. It's not true, and it also shows the diversity of the Romani communities, and shows the consequences of the systemic political decisions of majority. And this is very important to discuss it, and also what happened after the war. It's not like 1945 and then we have marginalized Roma. There were several decades especially in Central and Eastern Europe, of certain very forcibly assimilating policies towards Romani communities, which were very much orientated towards destroying the language, destroying the culture, and destroying the family unit of many of the traditional Roma communities, which very much affected these communities in Europe nowadays. But at the same time, it also shows that Roma are survivors, not victims, because when we are looking at the fact that at least half of the pre-war population of European Roma died during the Second World War, according to many estimations, and now we can see so many Roma very active, well-educated, being fluent in their minority word and their majority word, being very outspoken and being self-advocates for their own community, we can see that they are survivors and they are part of European societies. And on one hand, it can seem that it's obvious, and I shouldn't be saying that, but at the same time, they are being denied that on everyday basis in many contexts. And even if we have to answer the question, why should we think about Roma and Sinti Holocaust? Why should we teach about it? This is one of the instances of that, but I know that such questions are being posed and we have to answer them in a very concrete way. But the truth is, this is actually Romaphobia, Last Acceptable Racism in Europe, is a title of the book by Aidan McGarry. But I am trying to have a question mark behind it, because is it really a last acceptable racism in Europe? We can see that many of the examples are showing that it's the case. But at the same time, there's more and more alternative movements, alternative imagery produced by Roma and pro-Roma organizations or such institutions as ENRS in order to really combat this type of practices, which are unfortunately in many contexts are still very much visible. And when talking about Roma and Sinti genocide, sometimes I start the workshops with this photo. And especially for more mature audiences, this photo is a symbol of young Jewish women Holocaust or deportations. Whereas it was discovered in 1993 that it was actually Dutch Sintessa, Cecilia Steinbach, and it was discovered by a journalist who was very much interested in her story. But for many decades, nobody knew that she was Roma. And there are many of those Roma heroes and heroines, many of those Romani stories that are being visible just now, which is a huge resource that we should use and we should talk about, but it also shows the decades of being not present in this discourse when talking about Roma and Sinti genocide. And I'm also using sometimes provocation, so to speak, and talking about the stereotypes in a certain way. For example, one of the stereotypes that is very much connected to Roma is that Roma are nomadic, and it's part of majority Romani communities' culture. Whereas when we are talking about the statistics and the historical facts, pre-war, 30% of Roma were nomadic, and it was most of the time only economic nomadism on small distances, whereas nowadays it is about 5%. But still, this nomadic image is very much connected to this positive stereotype of a Roma person who is free, connected to nature, right? And for example, Esmeralda comes to mind, being like musically talented. Many, as you can see, many minorities have this type of discourse, right? Afro-Americans are musically talented, Roma are musically talented. Why? Because many of those minorities in 20s, 30s, for example, before the war, the only type of career that they could have was to be in show business or in sports, right? So they were visible there. So this connection very much given to that. But it is also very dangerous, or can be very dangerous, this nomadic image, because Roma are being treated as those, as I mentioned here, citizens because they are citizens and they are living in European countries for more than 7 centuries, and they consider themselves, many of them, as, for example, Polish and Roma, Romanian and Roma, Czechian and Roma. But at the same time, the image is that they can always get up and leave, but they don't have any roots anywhere. So if they don't have any roots, they don't contribute. They don't contribute to anything. They couldn't care less, so to speak, right? So this is a very, very dangerous image, especially when we are talking about some type of crises, social crises, economic crises, political crises, because it already, at that time, we are looking for somebody to blame. We're looking for somebody who is not with us, right? We are looking for sometimes for some type of enemies, right, inside. So this is can be very dangerous. And I'm always talking about this story, which I called Swangate. There was a story I'm originally from Krakow, and foundation was also founded in Krakow. And for many years, I was teaching at the Jagiellonian University. And there was an article in Gazeta Krakowska that Romanian Roma came to Krakow, to the Bagri. Bagri, it's like a water place in Krakow. Many people go there to swim during summer. And there was a rumor that Romanian Roma settled there and they're eating swans. And there was like a huge turmoil in the community there, local community in near Bagri region. There was like a neighbor guard formed. Police came there to check if there are any evidences of that. Nothing was found. Of course, the newspaper didn't write anything that it wasn't true. But at the same time, it already created a huge strife and huge hostility between the communities. And what it actually turned out that 2 years before, in 2008, two British tabloids, Daily Mail and The Sun, published exactly the same article, but there actually swans are kings and queens, royalty birds. And according to traditional UK law, it was punishable by death to eat a swan. But somebody else was eating swans in the UK 2 years before. Turned out it were Polish people who were coming to UK, because at that time there was pretty negative attitudes towards so-called new EU migrants, and Polish people were the majority of them, or the most numerous group. And it also shows how easy it is to use one story and just change the group connected to the story in order to create a hostility towards them. And we can say that every community needs to have their own gypsies, right? Gypsies, in a sense that it's being treated as a word in some contexts, as I mentioned, as a slur, as a negative word of someone that is outside of the society and is naturally contributing and is basically lying or not being truthful, right? But what is also important, why we need to speak about Roma and Sinti genocide and what happened before and after, is really the treatment of Roma people in contemporary European societies can be treated as a litmus paper for democracy and values, democratic values. How Roma are being treated, citizens, but at the same time, people considered outsiders, perpetual migrants, how their rights are protected, and what type of narrative is being brought up about them in the mainstream media or in the educational system can be considered as a test, so to speak, for democratic values. And of course, why we also need to speak about the Roma and Sinti genocide, because such statements are still being said by leaders of opinion in different countries, and there are many different explanations. This Bourdieu actually was convicted by the Council of Ethics, but then he appealed and was found not guilty for saying that word in that context. But many people present at that time said that he had every intention to direct those words against Roma, and this was his intention to say that. So even being this type of statement are being questioned if he had this intention or not, it also shows where is the boundary when really talking about Roma and what type of language can be used by leaders of opinion. And if leaders of opinion have this type of attitude and have this giving themselves permission to speak this way, how can we expect a different attitudes from the members of society? I also am a huge fan of the see, think, wonder method, or generally visible thinking, and I'm very much using when I'm teaching or conducting workshop with different groups, examples of Romani art, or sometimes Roma and non-Roma art about Roma, in order to show how this imagery and how the portrayal differs between when majority community sometimes shows Roma and how Roma show themselves. This is actually a painting by Gabi Jimenez. He is one of the very famous Romani artists with French and Spanish Romani groups origin, and he oftenly shows Roma like this, with some type of mask, so to speak, with the big eyes, noses. Nobody is really not that much recognizable, but also they don't have any mouth, right? So that can be this start of the discussion, depending of, for example, what the students will notice in this. Where is the voice of Roma? How many voices of Roma do they know? How many Roma do they know themselves? We as a foundation actually created a social campaign that we invited 7 members of the Romani community from Poland and Ukraine to speak about their dreams, about their personalities, about different outlets of their identity, Roma being one of them, but not only. And then we followed that with a billboard campaign in 15 Polish cities. And the start of this campaign was actually the research by the Center Against Prejudices and Professor Michał Bilewicz, which actually showed that 72% of Polish people don't know any person of Romani origin. And that actually inspired us to create this campaign. And it can also, those videos, those information available as well in English, can be a nice resource as well. I'm trying to skip a little bit towards imagery, because playing with the image, especially those images who are being prepared by Roma themselves, is always successful, especially with younger people, in our experience at least, who don't have that much knowledge about Roma. For example, showing the diversity of Roma. You can see me som Rom, I am Roma, and this is not typical imagery about Roma being shown in the mainstream media. They are also Roma, right? Showing videos and clips of young Roma. Showing, for example, here on the left side, recently deceased Edward Patkowski, who was actually Roma boy, a young boy who, as a 10-year-old boy, started to work in the resistance in Poland, and was caught when he tried to destroy a Nazi tank, and he was not recognized as a Roma person. And as the only member of his family, he actually was in Auschwitz I as a political prisoner, whereas all of his family members went to Zigeunerlager. And all of his family members actually died during the Second World War. He survived, and after the war, for many, many years, he met with many different youth groups to talk about his experiences. And this is also a lot of those resources. Some of them Usha already showed you, but there are many available resources in the materials I will also show you, that can be very much used in order to really talk about what happened during the Second World War. Or Charlie Chaplin. We know that he has both his mother and father were half Roma, and there is also his granddaughter wanted to create a documentary film about his experiences and inspirations from his childhood with the Roma community. But those information started to be available in mainstream in 2012. So you can see how this imagery is operating, because he never was afraid to speak about this, that he was Roma. All of his family knew. He was proud of his origin, but it wasn't trendy enough, I guess, to be brought up before that. Only in 2012 it started to be discussed in the public discourse. Or Bob Hoskins or Michael Caine, also with Polish and Roma origin, Quaresma, and many Roma activists who are from different countries are very much self-advocate for their own communities, but not that much visible in the mainstream media. And this is also what I'm very often showing, Roma Body Politics, a project also where Timea Ayunkas, that I mentioned before, was involved, in Gallery 8. Gallery 8 is a small gallery, community-based gallery in 8th district of Budapest, actually. And it's shown Roma activists, researchers, academics, intellectuals, as they are every day, and as they are as the stereotype that is prevalent in this case, Hungarian community. So we can see, for example, Agnes Daroci. Agnes Daroci was the first person that actually spoke Romanes in Hungarian television, and the first person who actually organized the exhibition of contemporary Romani art in 1979 in Budapest. And she's also a person of documenting a lot of Roma and Sinti survivor testimonies during the Second World War. But this is how the community, the society would like to see her. If we would like to put her in a stereotypical way as this old woman with a pipe, sometimes with magic, of course, when we go to the literature, or as I mentioned, those series, especially fantasy series, always showing some old Romani women being a witch, right? And having some bad intentions. And you can find it without any problem, this Roma body politics. But I also find this tool pretty successful when talking about, first of all, how Roma contribute themselves to fight with how they are being portrayed in order to provide alternative, reliable image. At the same time, also shows how those stereotypes are prevalent, how they are so strongly embedded in us. And sometimes every one of us has stereotypes, of course, but sometimes we're not aware that can be very harmful for some of the communities. Yeah, I will just go very, very quickly through that. And what can be, how to do certain things, for example. We mentioned some of the things already, that first of all, to raise awareness about the diversity, because many times, for example, somebody will say, should we speak, Roma or Gypsy? What term should we use, right? And I will say Roma because it's more politically correct. It's used is a term for the Romani language, and it's being coined as a term from the political Romani movement. But at the same time, somebody will say to me, and I know a person who is saying about themselves that they are Gypsy and they are no Roma. And of course, there are many different strategies, and all the communities and all the individuals will call themselves differently. So it's very good to show different strategies of different Roma communities and different Roma people, individuals, because they will have a different names about themselves, talk about differently about culture, about tradition, about their experience of trauma, for example. And those testimonies, historical ones and contemporary ones, which are also available, are very useful. Education, building those connections. So talking about the fact that Roma were, for example, hunted for several centuries in many European countries, where there are chronicles showing that Roma were hunted like foxes, like deers, were treated as entities between animals and humans. And the centuries of dehumanization actually led to this type of treatment that Roma were experiencing, not only during the Second World War, but also afterwards. That Roma were brought to colonies, that Roma were banished from different countries, that in 18th century, Romani children were taken from their parents and put with, for example, Hungarian families in order to destroy the language and destroy the culture. And many Hungarian Roma, because of this forcible assimilation, were unfortunately lost for temporarily the language. And those ideas, for example, are being brought up in different countries in 21st century as a viable solution for marginalized communities to talk, for example, to take Romani children and put them in boarding schools in order to limit their connection with their families that are living in impoverished condition. So without knowing the history and what happened, we cannot really prevent what were the consequences that led to it. And some of those ideas are being brought up, as I mentioned, contemporary. Although the fact that more than half of the Roman population till 1851 were slaves in Europe. It is not discussed. We are not talking about slavery in European context, but this is the fact that also shows Roma and their plight as a consequence of centuries of persecution. But what is the most successful is involving Roma themselves. Very often in our foundation, we are working in pairs. There's a member of the Roma community or two members of Roma community with different backgrounds, different experiences, some of them with educational, academic experience, and some of them with, for example, professional experience in different avenues, in order to show the diversity, to show the testimonies, and to show that every Roma person can have a different outlook on different aspects of their culture, of their plight. And it's very important to really individualize Roma. And I cannot stress that enough. It seems very obvious, but it's not always the case when talking about Roma. And there's very often the rhetorics of they and us, especially in the classroom. But because they behaving like this, they are doing this, right? So this is very, very important. And what we are also, and many other organizations are finding useful, is really using art and culture of Roma themselves, Roma and Sinti, in order to present certain topics, certain ideas. Like, for example, Krzysztof Gil, he is also a Romani artist, a PhD from the Art Academy in Krakow, and he actually created this panoramic painting showing the history of huntings on Roma in European countries. So it is not that may be visible here, but in between those deers are actually bodies of human bodies that were hunted at that time. And then he used this to create this cubicle, this yurt, so to speak, that everybody could get into and see that with point lights and recording of his grandma speaking in Romanes about Roma, his story, how they were hiding in forests to avoid persecution, to avoid being caught. And although we are talking about 15th, 16th, 17th centuries, at the same time, many Roma, for example, hiding in Eastern Ukraine, or Eastern Poland during the Second World War, because Roma were not only killed in ghettos and concentration camps, but also when they were traveling, they had the same experience of hiding in the forest, of speaking in whispers in order to survive. What is also important, and I think very useful, can be very useful, is using the local context. So if there is a memorial site, or if there is a person, there is organization, there is Roma education assistant, there is an author or a book or something that we can really have connection with and localize it and really work with young people to discover it themselves, that is always in our case very much very much successful in our experience. And those simulations that were mentioned as well, we are using it oftenly, using the real life examples, creating hypothetical situation and creating those roles in order to try to find solution for real life a real life situation involving Roma. And it is also very resulting in a lot of creative solutions and ideas that can be used in real time. And I know I'm always
Yeah.
I show you some examples.
Maybe just a brief sum up, because I see that you've got still a lot of slides, and I'm sure that they're very interesting. Just for our participants, there's time for a question. So if you want to comment somehow or ask a question to Małgorzata or to me, just do not hesitate, really. So just please come up on chat with your questions, or maybe you can write which of the things Małgorzata talked about or I mentioned you will be eager into using in your practice, or maybe some memorial which is near to your place of yeah. So just briefly, Małgorzata, if you could just a few more minutes, and we are very much looking into your comments.
Yeah, I will share the resources with all of you, right? Via Ursula. But this is the resources we can recommend. We are actually now conducting a project together with Poland Museum, with ERIAC, as I mentioned, in Berlin, and the Brno Museum in Czechia, which is very much devoted about going a little bit deeper in regards to the disseminating knowledge and tools of localized context with museum employees as well as educators. And we prepared a list of resources that I think can be useful for you, and I will share with that. There's, of course, Shoah Foundation with the testimonies. You can see the virtual exhibition in Block 13, which is devoted to the genocide of Sinti and Roma. And it can be also a useful material for education, especially that this exhibition, I think it's very, very well organized because it also shows what happened pre-war to many Roma and Sinti in different countries. So shows the history of families, it's actually individualizing people and families, showing personal stories. And in my opinion, is a very, very very strong and very powerful. It also has the names of the Roma that were brought to Auschwitz, to Zigeuner Lager, in those records saved by Tadeusz Rachimowski, and also Dina Gottliebowa's drawings for Dr. Mengele. So, but this is for those who cannot go. This is the virtual tool, and I think it can be also a useful tool for you. Holocaust remembers that there are also a lot of resources. Some of them are visual, some of them are reading material. One of my favorite resources is Roma Sinti Genocide EU, whereas it's maybe I will just very quickly show it. It's available, I think, in 12 or even more languages. You can see them here. Can you see my screen or not anymore?
No. I think
okay.
you're sharing only the
Yes,
window.
I will share it quickly. Yes, and hopefully now you should be able to see it.
Yeah.
And this is also the what is ingenious about it, that they are using one photo. And it's very simple, so to speak. This is the small tidbit of information. There is a task to be done, and the origin of the photo with a short information below regarding, for example, settlements. And it is, as you could see, the topics are of 6 different eras, starting also before the war, but also with survivors. And sometimes what I'm doing is also combining, for example, 3 of those fact sheets or photo sheets and trying to find a common denominator, like, for example, identity, registration, right? Or connections or family. And you can use not only one, but several of them in order to introduce a topic, not only about Roma, but about, for example, minorities or about cultural diversity. It's very, very useful in many contexts. And also there is a teacher resources, available there, teacher materials with additional tasks that can be used, including drama, including zoom in, zoom out with photos, many creating biographies as well, and their biographical research. And there are other resources here. I know we are almost out of time, but I will send you the links as well. Yeah, and there's an encyclopedia being created, very interesting. Also a project with Joanna, my partner in the foundation, and president of the foundation, is one of the contributors there. Yes, and there are video podcasts on genocide of the Roma here, voices of the victims in Roma archive, as well the testimonies of the survivors. And some of the resources, more reading material from Sinti and Roma, which is a site run by the Heidelberg Archive Center in Germany, and Central Council of German Sinti and Roma with Romani Rose that I mentioned before. And this is the full step of what I'm talking about. I used a little bit more than my 39 minutes.
No problem, no problem. Still waiting for your comments. If you, for example, want to share which of the teaching resources you would like to use in the future, just do not hesitate, and you can write it on chat. Actually, I've got one question because we do not have. It's already 5:25. Yeah, so actually, I think that we'll be just finishing soon, and I've got one question. In Romania, could you elaborate on that, Elena? Because I do not get fully your comment that you are using in Romania, using Romani terms. Just could you elaborate on that, and I will just speak briefly about the formal issues. I would like to very much kindly ask you to fill the survey, because we are just funded by the EU, so that's why we need a few words from you. So just put it on the chat. Yeah, you just need to click on the link and then fill there are a couple of things which need to be said in the survey. That's one thing I just wanted to mention. And Małgosia, it was really inspiring, and I really I just see the comment, just a sec. I would like to use that material for our optional topic, genocide in the 11th grade in the European School of Ljubljana. I really like the usage of personal story. Thank you for letting us know, and we're just gonna provide you, with the list of the links, not making it too long, but thank you very much, actually, Małgosia, for everything, but for the photos and for the ideas where to start, because it's really somehow, I believe, difficult to start, and expecting, for example, all the stereotypes which might be thrown at the teachers, and I think that really starting with the images, as you show, it might be a really perfect idea, and with the art, and we really much appreciate that your work in that field.
Thank you so much. And I also want to, for example, I'm saying to include Roma voices, right? I was saying that, but it doesn't mean, and I also meet with the apprehension on the other hand, that, I don't know any Roma, I don't know that much about the topic, so it's better if I don't speak about it. No, it's not about that. We can use testimonies, we can use those resources that we have on video, and put this topic in a broader context, right? To your students the best, so you know how to relate with them. But you don't have to be an omnibus in everything, because nobody is. But you can use those stories from those resources that are already there.
Yeah,
that are already available. And it's always, even the tidbit of information is a step forward when talking about the plight, contemporary plight of Roma and Sinti, because all of this lack of knowledge is affecting how they are being treated and portrayed today.
And actually, that's what you started from. I think the very last sentence, the part you said about that the Roma were made responsible for talk about Roma, and that's really awful. You know, it's like that you just think, okay, that's their history, so they should speak about that. We're not Roma, so how we can, you know, but they're not here in a lot of places, and they do not have a voice. And actually, to have this courage to just, you know, just to try a little bit and not to like push it. So it's your story, so you need to tell that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Thanks very much also for your comments. So you wrote that it's a very good material to work with the 8th grade, and it teaches sensitivity and critical thinking. So I think we'll be just finishing shortly. We are just very encouraged you to stay with us in touch. I would like to again mention Łukasz Migniewicz, who's the author of the teaching resources. I think that he's among the participants, but he just cannot, you know, turn into speaking. But I really recommend you using his teaching resources. He did a great job, and you are very much welcome to feedback and to, you know, write what's on your mind about the teaching resources we created. And of course, we recommend you to contact Małgorzatas Foundation too if you need like any support. And
Of course.
And yeah.
And if you are in Warsaw, please visit us in our Roma Community Center.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. So have a great afternoon. Thank you very much for your time. And like, it's really great always to work with the teachers, because they really decided to, you decided to spend this time in such a way listening to this really important subject. So we really thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, and hopefully see you in person.
Yes.
Have a wonderful afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.